These four countries, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Greece, and these three peninsulas, the Iberian Peninsula, the Italian Peninsula, and the southern end of the Balkan Peninsula, have several commonalities. I'm going to go through the five I believe are the most important. First of all four share a Mediterranean climate, which is a warm, dry summer, cool, moist winter climate. Typically, locations with this kind of climate are important agricultural producers, since a Mediterranean climate permits the growing of some of the most expensive legal crops, including things like grapes, olives, citrus, and all of these garden variety vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, melons, all of these sorts of things that you're familiar with. In fact, Spain is the leading producer of olive oil in the world. Italy is a global leader in the production of wine in the world. And Portugal is the leading producer of cork on earth. Cork, of course, goes into the top of the bottle. Now, cork is the bark of a particular type of oak tree, the cork oak tree. As you might expect, wine is frequently served with meals, and fresh fruits, vegetables, olives, and olive oil are staples of the Mediterranean cuisine. Because of the climatic similarities, Southern European countries also share the same natural vegetation, which is known as maquis in that part of the world. In Southern California, we generally refer to this type of vegetation as chaparral. Plant communities of this sort are typified by having low-lying scrubby brush and grass vegetation on the open hillsides, along with drought-resistant tree species such as evergreen oaks. At the same time, this part of the world has been heavily deforested. At one point, thousands of years ago, most of southern Europe was covered in forests. However, the ancient people, beginning thousands of years ago and accelerating during the Renaissance, began to cut the forests down. Now, historically, these forests were cut down and used as fuel and building materials. And the cleared land was then used to graze animals. In particular, Southern Europeans have grazed sheep, goats, and cattle for thousands of years. And in some cases, this has further accentuated the denudation of the natural vegetative landscape. Areas that were forested in many places are now stark, white, and rocky. The usage of land for grazing, known as transhumance, that means moving animals from place to place to take advantage of pasture land, which, as we've met, is a common thing in marginal agricultural landscapes, continues to this day. Shepherds graze their animals in low-lying areas in cold winter months, then move them up the mountain slopes in the spring, continuing on up to higher alpine zones in the summer, and then return to the valleys in the late fall. By herding the animals in this way, they're able to take advantage of the full range of the naturally growing vegetation at the appropriate times of the year. As a result, cheeses in general, and goat cheeses in particular, such as feta and chev, along with dry, hard cow's milk cheeses like Parmesan and Romano, very famous cheeses, are found throughout the area. You can see in this photograph here, this is a woman literally delivering milk on the back of a donkey, or is that a burro? What would I know? At about 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. I caught this when I was in Spain one time, and they had milked the cows and were going from house to house. She would pick those big containers, those metal containers up, and people would leave their milk containers out on the front porch, and she would fill them up and then put the cork back into them. This is remarkable. But this is common because they graze a lot of animals there. When you graze those animals, you're grazing them for food overwhelmingly. The fifth commonality is tourism. Tourism plays a critical role in the economies of all four of these countries, and it's no exaggeration to say that some parts of Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Greece rely on a healthy tourism industry to maintain economic viability. The tourist trade is based on the combination of beautiful and alluring Mediterranean Sea and its beaches, and the ancient ruins of the Greeks, the Romans, and the Moors. In fact, these four countries are some of the largest recipients of tourists in the world. You can see in this picture, Segovia, Spain. Look, we don't have that in the United States. So people will pay to go see castles that look like that. This, by the way, like most of the fortifications in Spain and in the Iberian Peninsula, were defensive against the Moorish invasion that began to happen from North Africa in the 700s, and then eventually was completely expelled in 1492, the year that Columbus sailed. That was no coincidence. This is at the Acropolis in Athens and the very famous Parthenon. This is, of course, just down below that. You can kind of see it off to the left-hand side, the Temple of Athena. Athens is named after that. The Colosseum, one of the most famous structures on earth. Gladiators, Romans, lions, Christians. But did you know it had a retractable roof? Amazing. In addition to that, they would sometimes fill it with water, or part of it with water, and have ship battles. Just remarkable, crazy, wild world those Romans lived in. This is the Roman Forum, which would have been the center of ancient Rome. If you look off in the distance, the yellow arrow is pointing at the triumphal arch of Titus. And then in the foreground, where I have the red arrow, there's something else. Let's start with this. So the triumphal arch of Titus was built as a result of the sacking of the Middle East, in particular Jerusalem, when the Jews rebelled against the Romans. That arrow where the red is at, the red arrow, this is where, believe it or not, Julius Caesar was cremated. He walked right on that path that you can see that goes right through the middle of the picture on the day that he was murdered. Et tu, Brute? He walked on those stones. That's really the Appian Way right there, the center of it. And he walked over to the Senate building where he was assassinated. And then he was cremated where you see that red arrow. On the Arch of Titus, look at that. This is a menorah because, of course, they sacked the ancient Ptolemaic temple and then brought back the booty. Believe it or not, much of Rome is built, modern Rome that is built with ancient structures or the ancient stones and brickwork from ancient structures that the Romans built. This, if you look carefully, is part of the Senate building. Literally, the place where Julius Caesar was assassinated is still part of this much more modern building. This is at Campo di Fiori in Rome. Walk down the street, oh, there's Roman columns. They're just part of a building. This is the Pantheon. Pantheon means all gods. The Romans became very, how should we put this, ecumenical. Rather than having to go from one temple to another, they figure, why waste time? We'll just put all the gods in the same place, which was in the Pantheon. And if you look carefully, look what it says on there. M. Agrippa. That's Marcus Agrippa. Take your camera, throw it up in the air, and it's going to take a great picture in Venice. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. A disturbed place, as we'll see, but an important and beautiful place. Take a look on the left-hand side. As I said, you can't take a bad picture there. What you'd notice in Venice is that there is an abundance of Moorish architecture, Arab architecture, because this was very popular at the time when Venice was first being constructed 1,000 years ago. Lake Como up in the Alps, beautiful. In fact, even George Clooney has a house there. And of course, there's this, right? The Leaning Tower of Pisa. You probably know that the Leaning Tower is a bell tower. The church is off to the left-hand side. And if you look carefully, they realized it was leaning as they were building it, and they began to adjust so that the top is tilted a little bit over towards the left to adjust for the fact that the tower itself was tilting. Torre pendente in Italian. This is what draws people to Southern Europe. Tourism.